Hi, this is Irv Steele, your host of Local Issues, and today we are really excited to have a guest that helps us to continue our discussion around conservation and environmental issues, and he is the president of Avalonia Land Conservancy. So Dennis Main, welcome to the show. How are you?
My pleasure to be here.
It's good to have you back in the area, and we were just talking right before the show started how unique Avalonia is, that throughout the state we have something like 120 land trusts. Usually it's town by town, so Groton might have one or East Lyme has one, but the unique thing with the organization that you're leading is more of a regional one. Is that right?
That is correct. We actually started out as Mashantucket Land Trust back in 1968. We changed our name in 1995, but when we started out we were a 4-town land trust at that time. So we kind of had the beginnings of being a regional land trust. What we've tried to do is actually work with towns throughout the entire CCOG area to become a regional land trust that was conserving land in all of those towns. We've got about 4,700 acres of the 54 that are owned. As I mentioned, we had the conservation easements, but the fee properties, those are ones that we have, and those are right now in about 13 of the towns. But we currently have properties that we're looking at in almost all of the 22 towns, and sometimes it's in conjunction with another land trust that's local. For example, we're working with Waterford on a parcel of 175 acres that we're trying to acquire down there, but we're doing it mutually with the Waterford Land Trust.
Okay, so taking one step back, just higher level, kind of 30,000 foot view, is you're in about 22 towns is what it sounds like, and right now, and then over 5,000 acres of land conserved, and you're collaborating with different towns, so you can work with the Waterford Land Trust and collaborate to go acquire over 100 acres with them right now.
Correct, and again, the 22 towns is the mission area. That's what CCOG, the Southeast Council of Governments, we're analogous to them as far as our mission area. And again, as we mentioned earlier, we have 2 islands that we own, Sandy Point and South Dumpling. South Dumpling being in New York and Sandy Point being in Rhode Island and Connecticut.
So you're outside of even Connecticut?
Yeah, slightly.
Slightly with islands.
Those were unique opportunities to get those probably about 20 years ago. So we did conserve those, and in both cases we're working with other folks on those too.
Great. So then how would it work? Let's say Waterford, do they approach you? You kind of approach Waterford Land Trust and say, hey, we have 150 acres that we're trying to acquire. Can you walk us through how that collaboration works with these different towns?
Well, in some cases, and I guess that Waterford's a good example where they weren't quite at the level where they could go in and get the funding required to purchase it. So we would go in on an open space grant with the state of Connecticut DEEP, and that application, sort of jointly developed, is now into the state. We would end up owning it, managing it, but we would do it in cooperation with the local land trust.
Because you have so much experience acquiring over 5,000 acres, you kind of know how these grants work with the state.
Exactly. And again, those grants come out once a year. So you've got to be in line and ready to put in the application. We actually put in 6 last year. And those
so there's no maximum amount you can put in?
It would depend on each year's specific requirements, but last year there was no limit, so we put one in Ledyard, we put one in Lebanon, we put one in Griswold, North Stonington, New London, which is a rarity, and we could talk about that one a little bit, and the Waterford one. So the Waterford's 175, Camp Laurel, that's a joint one with the Trust for Public Land, TPL. They have the contract on the Camp Laurel former Girl Scout camp up there, and then we will be the end holder of that eventually. That's about 343 acres.
Wow, that's a good size.
That's significant. Ledyard, that's about 30 acres. North Stonington is 100 acres, about 25 in Griswold. And New London is part of 24 acres that Shiloh Church has down there that we are working with them. Hopefully we'll be able to split that between some of it being developed and some of it going into conservation. What's unique is that it's 15.75 acres that abuts the Arboretum.
Wow. And
So
for
that's awesome.
yeah,
Connected up to the 700 plus acres of the Arboretum.
the Arboretum's phenomenal
Yeah,
there. Yeah, it's
yeah.
a really nice connection to have that. And with these different grants with the state, is there a maximum size? Usually, is it about $500,000 that the state supports?
No, actually, and Avalonia has the record for, I believe, still the highest award of an OSWA grant for it's a $5.6 million acquisition of 673 acres in Montville.
Oh,
And we're still working
congratulations.
to close that, and that would be a new town that we've expanded into over the last few years, you know, from the original towns.
And that's a huge piece of land, over
It's
600
huge.
acres.
Any idea how many acres in a square mile?
It's about a square mile, isn't it?
640 in a square mile, so that's larger than 1 square mile.
Larger than 1 square mile.
Beaver and bear and bats and bobcats, and you know that's just getting in the bees for the number of animals there, the bugs and the
Phenomenal.
bees.
And the situation with that is currently owned all by a trust of one woman, is what I remember.
Yes, it was 2 trusts originally, the Lewis and Gladys Bond Trust. He's passed away, she's still alive, so the 2 trusts are really under her. So yeah, that's one of the largest that I'm aware of individually owned parcels available for conservation in the Southeast Council government area.
That's amazing.
So that's going to be amazing to save.
Yeah.
And it's just phenomenal. Anybody who has gone out there is just, you know, awestruck by the ability. They've even allowed us to install a barn owl nest that one of the Cub Scout troops went out and put up in conjunction with First Wildlife Rehab.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the way that you phrase it, you kind of say, this is a property that we're going to save. And I want you to kind of dig a little bit deeper into that, kind of for some of our viewers who might not know a lot about conservation or might be trying to find out more about the environment. Why do you describe it as saving this property?
Okay, if we back up a little bit to why we're doing this, one of the basic tenets that we operate under is the state green plan. And the state green plan goal is to save 21%, have it conserved, 21% of the state lands. So we've been working towards that goal. You know, we started out with 0, we're up to 5,400. It was kind of a methodology to keep increasing what we were able to save. And it usually has to have high criteria value, you know, some conservation reason to save it. You know, it's watershed protection, it's animal protection.
Water, animals, these things.
Yeah, and a lot of it does get to be watershed protection. Particularly the Bond one that feeds Latimer Brook coming down through. So that was really kind of an important piece.
Yeah, water is becoming more and more of an important issue.
And
for
trees.
Sure.
You know, trees filter water,
Yeah.
so you know, they're part of the equation. And it's easier to save forest land than to create forest land. So you've got an awesome forest area like that one has. That one in particular, we were working on a federal grant, which will have a federal forestry easement on it. And they've approved an evaluation of $668,000 grant towards that forest. And then they'll do a forest management for us of that parcel.
And with some of these different acquisitions, I'm sure you run into different challenges. So for this over 600 acre one, it's it's been in the works for a little while now. And you, like you said, you're amazingly possible to get this huge grant from the state. But then my understanding is it went to the voters of Montville to help with the rest. I think it was 1.5 million, something like that. And what I saw is that they voted it down. So what do you do from there? What's the next step with all that?
Well, that one we were actually looking for 1399750 was the gap funding that we needed, which was 25% of the total purchase price. The voters didn't vote for it, but we got 399 people who did vote for it, who are a nucleus of supporters who stood in line for up to an hour and a half in line to vote for it. So, you know, that's pretty significant support. Yeah, there was a lot of people who voted, you know, as a pocketbook issue. They didn't really want to fund the bonding. So we go on to the next source, and there's actually a bill in for some additional bond funding for
in Hartford.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that that's been on social media that that bill is introduced, and you know, we're still looking at different ways. But we also were in line for another $500,000 grant, which was our gap funding from private foundation. So we have formal notice of that last week.
Nice.
So it's all looking very positive.
That's
you know, again, it's a lot of work and a lot of, but once it's conserved in perpetuity, so forever. So we're only doing this once.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, but you do it one time, so hopefully
and
it's taken care of.
that will be our largest ever. But it's
Largest
not.
ever.
It's, you know, it's not out of our wheelhouse. We've done a 409-acre one over in North Stonington,
Which is also a huge piece of property.
Griswold, and Preston.
Wow.
We call it the Tri-Town. That was 409. And when you add in other properties around it, it's over 500 acres, or close. Probably take some other private ones that are conserved over there. You know, you're up in the 1,000 range quickly.
And some people, like you said, they just look at their pocketbooks, what it costs here right now, maybe to do a bond or to add some more funding to it. But like you said, there's 399 people in Montville who saw the value of this. What are some of the things that you talk to people when they're kind of considering, is this something our town should support, or is this something that our state should support? What are these values that this open space brings to a town or a region? You want to talk about that a little bit?
Well, a lot of, basically you're going to get, with the state grant type projects, one of the things that's required in it is the passive recreation aspect. So whether it's hiking, biking, photography, bird watching.
Bird watching counts as recreation. Nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's, you're out walking, et
Yeah.
cetera. And the science of it too is that you're really bringing in data from those lists that people create when they're out bird watching, et cetera, that is very useful to the scientific community, or documenting, you know, rare species that might be around, et cetera. We've also had a positive impact on, you know, when you get into the development issues, you're talking taxes for schools and things like that, and just quality of life. People need that outside, and you know, the air, the filtration of water, all of those. There's so many pieces of it that fit into it.
It touches
you know,
health in many different areas, the water, all these pollutants that people could put in if we don't conserve it. It's true.
And back to the, you know, the state green plan, that 21%. In New London County, you've got probably about 537 square miles in the CCOG area. Once that translates at 640 to about 370,000 acres.
Wow.
Times 21% is about 77,000 acres to be conserved for the 21%. And that's split between the state and the partners. So, you know, we're looking at trying to conserve somewhere around the 40,000. So our 5,400 is, you know, it's a small part of that right now.
Small part, but it makes a chunk.
But when you add in the towns and everything else, we're up to probably about 2/3 of that green plan goal.
Nice, getting closer and closer to it.
Closer and closer. But, you know, we started out slow. We conserved 600 acres in the first 20 years, from 1968 to 1988. By 2008, we were up to about 2,600, so we were conserving closer to 100 acres per year. Right now, we're conserving at the rate of, with 5,400 acres we currently have.
Wow.
And looking at about another 2,500, you know, we're conserving closer to 400 to 500 acres a year. So we're picked up speed, you know.
Sounds like some good momentum.
We've got the bandwidth,
Yeah. And so much of, like you said, you and your team, you have the experience going to both raise funds, but then also to write these grants and these different opportunities, that it seems like there's a lot of opportunity to kind of leverage this economy of scale when you go work with a Waterford land trust or another land trust with a specific town. And maybe there's even opportunities to kind of merge and acquire these different land trusts. Does that ever happen too?
Yeah, and that's a great segue probably from your conversation with Amy Patterson.
Yep.
You know, I can't say enough about CLCC and Amy Patterson and the folks up there in Lefland, the deputy director, that have worked with us on mergers. We had one with East Lyme that we weren't able to pull off, you know, and that's, you know, made the media, some of the issues that they had down there. Unfortunately, their president passed away, and he was actually a member of our board. And that was one we were actively looking to bring together. But Now we are working with another land trust, which is an accredited one, with Colchester Land Trust, and that looks very positive that we'll be able to pull that together and be able to sort of pool those resources. They have up at Buckley Woods, one of their preserves, they have a great education center they set up for outdoor education. That's something we don't have on a preserve, so they would bring something in that would be new for us.
Great, learn from each other that way.
Excellent. And I think we were able to bring in a lot of stuff to them that, everybody has to do the same audits, they have to do the same registrations, these all cost money. We've also been fortunate in knowing through accreditation that we needed to have reserves, that we've been able to set aside the full Land Trust Alliance, which is our accreditation agency at a national level. We've been able to set aside those reserves so that all of our past acquisitions are now fully funded for reserves, for legal defense funding and those stewardship.
That's
so
great.
That's, really
good news.
That's super.
Yeah.
But as we acquire more, obviously, we need to continue. We've been able to hire a full-time stewardship director.
Great.
So that brings kind of that professional oversight to all the town committees.
Right now, your staff is a staff of one, just this one person, or there's
No.
other team members as well?
We actually have a staff of 4.
Okay.
That includes an office manager. It's full-time. We have an office administrator that is half-time. We have a full-time stewardship director, and we just added a half-time, and this will be a good segue into some other things, a director of philanthropy.
Great.
And that gets into that fundraising, because obviously our budget, as we've increased the staffing, has gone up. So, when we're talking to the public out there, yes, we need the donations to continue coming in. We've got membership, we've got annual appeals, we've got specific projects where our acquisition fund, we go out and raise money for an acquisition specifically.
And your membership, is that a main strategy of how you try and raise these funds?
Membership actually is only about 10% of our operating income, but getting the members, those members are then our stewards and our supporters, and the people who know people
bring other people in.
Bring other people in. So it's not a major cash of our overall operation total budget, but it is important. And,
lots of other
and
value
again,
they bring.
the more we grow it, the more that will then bring in. As I mentioned, we have that the new director of philanthropy, and one of the things he's working on. I don't know if you see this. This was our, going back historically, our old logo, and there's a big one on the back here, and then we moved into the newer logo. But there's a lot of people that are legacy people that go back, and have a historical connection to Avalonia. In 1995, we changed our name from Mashantucket Land Trust to Avalonia Land Trust, and that was to avoid confusion. At the time, Teresa Bell from the tribe, who was the public relations officer there, she agreed that she was getting confusion coming into them. We were getting confusion to us, that we were both Mashantucket. And they were fully supportive of us as a land trust, but we agreed the land trust was changing. So another change was, again, to go to the logo that's much more scalable for media use and much more simplified, et cetera. So, but there are people who still remember the old logo,
the classic
and
one.
Classic, and a lot of legacy members. We have 540, I believe, currently. If everybody's still alive today, life members out there, and then we have, again, new members coming in. So I think one of the things with our life members and the legacy giving and that kind of thing is, hey, start, get those conversations of people, who want to make those larger donations, or the wills, leave something to Avalonia, who's been long-time supporters. A lot of us, I grew up, I was in high school when Avalonia started, so as we're getting out near to the end, that have been, Avalonia's been a lifestyle to us, or conservation has.
And an important part of your life, I'm sure, as well.
Yeah, so I think that this may be something that ties into that. People that have that sort of
That connection to it.
familiarity and connection.
Definitely. So this new director of philanthropy, they are helping with memberships, these different drives they have going on, and then helping with grants, anything else that they're kind of focused on these days.
Yeah, he was actually working on bond. We just had a new little bit of a drive because we have a stewardship director and this need to get out and do more and more. You know, we've had a number of trailers donated. We are now working on a truck fund. And we're up to close to $30,000, which is really for an operating truck that can haul around trailer and equipment and, you know, be able to get people out, you know, to do stewarding of properties. You know, we've had a number of great programs happening there with, you know, planting, whether it's Scotch pines or oak trees or a replacement or, you know, brushy habitat that we're trying to create with low, good brush rather than bad brush, like
not the invasive type.
Not the invasive type.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Because it's not just that you work so hard, you raise all this money, and then you go and acquire the land, and then that's it. There's a lot of kind of management and stewardship, as what you're saying, to take care of it and ensure people can get the best use out of it.
Absolutely. They did a good one out at our park preserve in North Stonington, where the park dam was, getting rid of Japanese knotweed. You know, so then you have to replace it with something so that it just doesn't keep coming back, but something that will take its place. Hoffman Evergreen Preserve, we did a great project a few years ago of taking out a lot of trees that were falling down and clean that up. And now they're doing different plantings in there. And it was really pretty cool because we could get the kids out there from the Stonington Science, you know, the environmental group and stuff to see it.
That's wonderful.
CLCC is actually coming down. That's one of, I believe May 31st, they're going to have a walk there with one of their program directors up there that will show that as a demo site of some of the work that's done through some of the grants that we get through CLCC.
That's great.
As well.
So it sounds like my understanding is through a lot of your strategies that at the end of the day, whether you're working with CLCC or you're working with the Waterford or East Lyme Land Trust or another town land trust, a lot of the bottom line, end of the day goals and missions seem very common. You're kind of all working towards this common goal of conservation, helping the environment, getting kids education, different people involved in the natural habitat. Is that right? Of course, there might be some competition between different land trusts, how much you can acquire or how much money you can raise. But at the end of the day, everyone's kind of working towards a common goal. Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And I think a good example, probably because we started off as those four towns. You had Groton, Stonington, North Stonington, and Ledyard. Well, Groton also developed an in-house land trust down in Groton called GOSA, you know, Groton Open Space Association. A lot of our members are also GOSA members.
Okay.
And we only have about 150 acres conserved in Groton, including a recent one that Leo Antonino donated to us, which was going to be a former Walmart. The Superstore was going to go there, but that ended up being conserved. But basically, the other three towns, we have 1,200 acres roughly in North Stonington, 1,100 in Ledyard, and about 1,000 in Stonington. Only 150 because there was a lot of cooperation with GOSA, where GOSA would write the grants, and the land would end up being maintained by them. So, you know, I mean, we can collaborate, and you know, our members work on theirs, and theirs work on ours. You know, we have joint projects during Earth Day, for example. You know, with Groton and with GOSA, and we're working in conjunction with Tri-Town Trail Association and members of GOSA because the Tri-Town Trail is going to go all the way from Bluff Point to Preston Community Center.
That's amazing.
So, and we have parcels in between, you know, that may fit. But yeah, we've been working, and with Ground Utilities.
Yep. You bring corporates and companies involved.
We had a $159,865 check, I believe. A nice picture of this huge check, you know, that helped fund the Thompson Brook and Atkinson preserves on Long Cove Road, which abut the Groton Utilities.
That's awesome. So it sounds like from working with different companies to individuals, what are other ways that people can kind of help and support Avalonia?
Well, obviously, donations help a lot because we have operating costs. Our operating budget is about $290,000. including all the staff and all of the soft costs that go into it, et cetera. But then also stewarding, getting out, walking trails. There's just so many ways. Work parties.
Yeah. So
keeping their dogs on leashes.
Yeah, that's always a big issue.
Yeah.
It's tough when you're out there. But we just have a couple minutes left. So for our viewers, if they want to find out more about Avalonia, get in touch with you and the team, how would they find out more? How could they support you right off the bat here?
Yeah, absolutely. You can go on to avalonia.org. We've got a website, we've got Facebook, we've got Instagram, TikTok, you name it, Reels out there.
You're active.
Very, very media active. They can find us. And we're always looking for additional board members or town committee members. And we have, let me get a plug in here on the brand new advisory council. That only started in March.
Okay.
We have 19 members. They include people from conservation commissions, elected officials. Kathy Austin, senator, is one of those. We've got 2 organizational members, which are the Southeast Council of Government is an organization member with one of their staff, and Mohegan Tribe is an organizational member with one of their folks.
Nice.
So that's building up, and they only meet a few times a year, but they're people who know people, and it works out really well for us. So.
That's great. Getting a little bit of that buy-in, and then who knows where the value goes from there.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for all that you do leading this organization and making a huge impact on the environment. Dennis, really grateful for you taking the time today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you again.
Thank you, Irvin.